Human beings resist change. It's just ingrained in our nature. And what you really have to do is focus on encouraging the team to own the change. And you need to sell them on the change. Alignment is 100% critical, and it's something that lacks and prevents companies from growing. There's a phrase that I've used for probably the last 25 years. A fool with a tool is still a fool. Without understanding how to use that tool properly, or it's not integrated properly, it doesn't matter how great that tool is. There's no point in having that tool. They're taught how to use the tool, but not why they're using the tool. And I think the why is the important part. With that why comes the
Hello everyone, this is Michael Ocean, founder and CEO of SellMeThisPen. Today I have Jon Fraser on the show. He's the Chief Growth Officer at Dasro Tech Talent. And Jon has a robust background in leading growth initiatives globally with prior roles at Omniconvert and TheAppLabb. And he's known for his strategic insights in tech sectors like AI and cybersecurity. Jon also coaches and mentors senior executives and emerging leaders at Mento. So today we're going to talk about how to effectively build alignment between sales, marketing, and CS teams. Jon, over to you. How are you doing, sir?
I'm doing great today, Michael. Yeah, the topic is near and dear to my heart because I've worked in all three of the various silos that you discussed. And then I've also had roles where I overlay all of them. So I've been CRO, and my current role is Chief Growth Officer. I oversee all three of those buckets.
This is
And
amazing.
definitely alignment is 100% critical, and it's something that lacks and prevents companies from growing in a lot of the organizations that I work with.
Amazing.
Those silos are impediments and walls to be overcome. And a lot of times companies that are not successful, one of the main reasons why they're not successful is because they can't break down those silos.
This is great. Like, I'm super excited about this because, to your point, you've been there and you've done that, and you know what kind of damage not having these alignments can bring to, any organization. So to start, when your teams are chasing different metrics, it's like everyone playing a different sport, right? How do you bring them together under one unified set of goals?
Well, first off, we really need to identify what metrics matter to the company. And I think that's one of the biggest challenges today is companies don't really know what metrics matter. What's really important to their growth? What should they be focused on? And it comes from alignment at the very top level, at the leadership level. If there's no alignment from the leadership level to really agree on what those metrics are, then none of the other metrics make any difference whatsoever.
Makes sense. So, John, we all, start with new companies. We inherit a team. There are already, some structures in place, and some, alignment and some misalignments. How do you go about finding these challenges inside the organization before rolling out any plans?
So I've taken on roles where I have just specifically sales or marketing or customer success. I really focus on my vault of knowledge on what levers that can be controlled within that silo, and what's important for success within each of those areas. But more importantly, as I start to unravel a new organization that I'm working in, to really understand what levers are important to the company, and so I can influence the change from within my silo, for my colleagues in the other areas. Now, again, I'm going to go back to alignment. Alignment is critical. One of the first things I do is I reach out to the head of marketing, the head of customer success, the head of sales, depending on where I'm coming in from. Um, and in some cases, if I'm coming in as a chief growth officer or a chief revenue officer, and I have control over all of those, it's building the next level down of team leaders, building that consensus across the silos with them. Because in most cases, they have not been collaborating. And when that collaboration is not happening, they're not successful.
So, a follow up question on that. It seems like you start with people, obviously. You get to the head of the
Yes.
department, you start getting to know them, understand, their challenges before planning anything. Have you ever seen any resistance towards change? This is, I think the answer is clear, but I wanted to hear some real life examples, if you will, that you had to actually, communicate why it's important, not because it's coming from the top, but it will help their specific organization actually grow and flourish.
Yeah, I think we had this discussion last time we had coffee together. Human beings resist change. It's just ingrained in our nature. And what you really have to do is focus on encouraging the team to own the change. They need to be an integral part of that change, and you need to sell them on the change. You need to build excitement. You need to communicate with them. They really need to understand what's in it for them. Because at the end of the day, people are kind of greedy and a bit self-centered. That's horrible to say, but it's just human nature. So they really need to understand what's in it for them in this change. Uh, Definitely, there's going to be an altruistic part of the change that's going to benefit the overall company. But without that personal approach, it's going to fail.
Make absolute sense, just to be more relevant to the person in front of you and basically helping them achieve their personal goal rather than just like selling the company goal, because at the end of the day, people want to help the company, but they want to help themselves first. That makes
That's
sense.
right.
All right. Have you ever faced any challenges with data misalignments?
Yeah, 100%. Um, Data is I just got off a meeting in my current company where we talked about some misalignments on data. People don't even understand what data they're collecting and why they're collecting it. Um, they're collecting things in different fashions, using different methods, different tools, and without the context around the data that they're gathering and consistency around that data, there's no point in gathering it, and there's no ability to correlate across the various silos in the organization.
Mhm.
There's a principle that there's only certain, depending on the nature of the company that you're in, there's only a certain number of levers that you can push and pull in the company to become successful, e-commerce or SaaS sales or whatever. And you need to understand what those levers are. And if you don't have the data that's consistent and aligned, you're going to fail. You're not going to be able to push and pull those levers.
Many companies, like I can think of some of the clients that we are working with, they're in a growth, phase, and they, test new tools. They try to, leverage whatever they have or fire some of these tools because of what you exactly mentioned. Like, I'm using this tool to take my notes, and another department is using another one. CRM, data is, messy. When you inherit a team, I always like ask this question because I'm really curious for someone in your position as a C-suite, personnel. How do you go about evaluating these tools, and how do you deal with the resistance toward change again? So because tooling is a big part of what companies are dealing with, right? I'm used to, let's say, using Gong, for example, to collect some of these conversations, and you introduce a new tool or new strategy around tooling. How would you go about that?
So first off, when I get into a company, I evaluate the tools that they're using, and if at all possible, do no harm. Don't move the tool, at least especially in the short term. You want to try and make the tool work for you. But in some cases, you will get into a company, and I've been in a couple of times in my recent career where their CRM or some of their automation tools are just so horrendous that they're non-functional. And so, yes, you do need to do a rip and replace. But then it goes back to that change management. So you need to sell the people who are using the tools on the benefits, what's in it for them. What are they going to get out of taking the time and energy to learn this new tool and to work with it properly? A lot of time, though, people will blame tools for the ills. And really, at the end of the day, it's not. There's a phrase that I've used for probably the last 25 years. A fool with a tool is still a fool. Without understanding how to use that tool properly, or it's not integrated properly, it doesn't matter how great that tool is. And yeah, you could have a Salesforce, you could have any number of tools out there, and if it's not implemented and used properly, there's no point in having that tool. It's causing more harm than good.
hmm Based on your experience, like Is it a fact that people actually don't know how to use the tools? Like typically, like past 25 years, if you go back, to all the companies you work with, is it the fact that they actually don't know how to leverage the tools, or is just a variety of the tools that people use for different reasons?
It's a combination of that. Oftentimes they don't get great training when they're onboarded. And they don't really understand. They're taught how to use the tool, but not why they're using the tool. And I think the why is the important part. With that why comes the aha moment in how to use that tool effectively. And it opens up the opportunity for continuous improvement. Tools should be a living, breathing organism. They're not the be all end all. They should be continuously evolving. There's typically an underlying process supported within that tool, and that needs to be continuously evaluated and changed over the course of time.
That's really interesting. I wanted to get your perspective on what's the most important tool in a revenue organization. It could be anything, but I want to hear your thoughts on it. Like, what is one tool that at least needs to have unified data that everybody can have access to?
First and foremost, that could be your balance sheet. It doesn't matter what tool you're using, be it QuickBooks or something fancier. You need to understand the metrics of what's actually happening in the organization, the real numbers that matter. Then I would say having a really strong CRM is probably the next most important thing. That's your single source of truth in a revenue organization. Outside of that, everything that feeds into this and out of the CRM needs to be integrated and needs to be integrated properly. So you need to make sure that you understand the context of the data, the nature of the integration, the nature of the flow in and out, and make sure that everything aligns effectively.
That makes sense, and I completely agree with you because look at our, revenue organizations. When salespeople go on these conversations, they have different methods or ways of adding notes, or sometimes completely get rid of it. Did you update your CRM? Well, I will do that, and then you go to CSMs, you close the deal. They're like, okay, what you wrote here is completely different from what the actual client is looking for. How do you go about like actually looking inside your CRM to make sure that everybody's contributing correctly, so there is no misalignments between each team when there is a handoff?
So you can't spend all of your time overseeing the team. You have to build a sense of trust. So it comes from training, but it also comes from spot audits. You need to quality check from time to time, and you need to have a process around that to understand what quality means, what is good. At the same time, you don't want to spend too much time on that because you can't focus on what's strategic. I have a philosophy of perfect enough. The data will be perfect enough. Sure, there may be errors, but as long as you capture the essence of what's important to the company, that's great.
When it comes to data hygiene, where does come the most challenging team play a biggest role into this misalignments in your experience?
The sales team, the account manager, you call
Salespeople
them
are
what
gonna
you
hate
were.
me for that.
Yeah, well, and that's true. I mean, and I've been a sales guy for almost 40 years now. No one likes to enter things into the CRM and keep it clean and keep it up to date. By our very nature, we want to be out there selling. We don't want to be sitting in front of a keyboard. So salespeople are the number one culprits. I would say closely behind that is the customer service team as the number two. When they're on discussions with clients, they're not always categorizing information effectively. They're not always documenting all of the salient parts of the interaction with the client. And more importantly, they're not feeding it back to the sales team.
Makes sense. Look, there are a lot of tools out there right now. They can, take all these notes and based on your best practices, update the CRM. We are one of those as well. But how do you communicate this with your, let's say, sales team, and you mentioned customer support, to just understand why it's important to have this data? Because going back to your first point, it's all about them. What good does this to me as a seller or a CS person, that I need to even care about these tools, or even if I don't have a tool to do this manually?
It's really tying it back to what matters to them. And in most of their cases, it's their paycheck. They need to understand, at the end of the day, how much money they're making, what's the opportunity to make more, or to make the money that they are making easy. And it ties back into the quality of the data and for them to understand the importance of following process, of following good data hygiene, of really understanding why they need that data within the sales process. And again, that goes the whole 360-degree process life cycle of a customer. It's not just when you land that customer from day one, it's the customer success team as well, and feeding that back in. And the account managers will chase customer success will chase the account managers, and you'll get a bit of a self-policing of the data between those two teams over time.
Do you believe your reps burn leads practicing on client calls? When it comes to giving them one-on-one coaching sessions, just don't have the bandwidth, so you get rid of them altogether? Or maybe you notice that your team spends a lot of time on non-revenue tasks like taking notes, updating CRM, or drafting emails? These are the exact challenges we solve for other revenue leaders like yourself. With SellMeThisPen AI Coach, you can offer your reps role-play sessions at scale while automating one-on-one coaching sessions based on your best practices and methodology. Also, AI will take care of all their non-revenue tasks, like note-taking, CRM updates, draft the email for them, so they can focus on constant improvement while you're focusing on one thing and one thing only: revenue growth. If you're interested in learning more about the clients we are working with or use cases that might be beneficial to you, check us out at SellMeThisPen.ai. You know what, the way I'm looking at it, and maybe I'm completely off base, please correct me. Being in sales myself for a number of years, one thing that really worked for some of the organizations I work with was the fact that, look, you will get paid as a seller. At least I can talk about sales, not customer service. Is the fact that when an account spend more, we have upselling, cross-selling, you still get compensated. So that way you care enough to say, look, it's not a one-off transaction, especially when we talk about mid-market, enterprise sort of audience. If what I'm providing to the next person in another organization, they can do a better job, I'm more than happy to be a partner, and always even go on the calls if they need my help, let alone updating my CRM. In your world, what's the best strategy for companies to pump salespeople to actually be the partner rather than just be someone who's completely, hands off when they hand over a client to, let's say, a CS person?
Really well thought out comp plan. Comp plans are key, and any mid-market to enterprise comp plan, especially when you have that longer life cycle, or you have a long running customer where there's cross-sell and upsell opportunities, is you tie the compensation plans between sales, account management, customer success together. So they're going to certainly have an individual component, but also have a team approach where that team growth in the account is compensated effectively, and they're encouraged to work together. I've seen some great enterprise software companies have that model, and it's worked incredibly well.
Yeah. So what are your thoughts of having, let's say, a first point of contact? You got your salespeople doing the sales, but also they be part of each step of the sales until, again, the account is set, ready to go, already onboarded. Is it a good model to really kind of like have this collaboration, not necessarily for the life cycle of that client, because again, large organization might stay with you for 3 years, but at least for the initial phases? Is it a good model, or just distract, different teams from what they initially supposed to be doing?
Depends what you're selling. It depends on the complexity and the sales cycle. I mean, in certain cases, it's, one person can handle the entire sales cycle. You'll get into large enterprise, I'll use an Oracle or Salesforce or ServiceNow or something like that, where it's gonna span across a number of different groups. And yes, it's important for that salesperson to be the quarterback of that process until it closes. But you're going to have pre-sales, you're going to have sales engineers, you're going to have maybe proposal rating teams, you're going to have a number of different people involved in that process. But someone's got to own it at the end of the day. Someone's got to own that process.
So would you say it makes sense, again, for companies that are targeting mid-market enterprise level clients to have a separate role for each, or have this involvement across the board when you bring a new client?
I think it's better to have, and again, it really depends on what you're selling.
For sure.
Even mid-market to enterprise, sometimes the sales cycle is very simple. Sometimes it's very complex. The more complex the sales cycle, the more components involved, the larger the number of decision makers on the other end, and all of the various decision factors. It's going to be important to have that integrated team. The simpler the tool, your tool, for example, I think, it's a fairly straightforward sales process. Maybe yourself, maybe a sales engineer talk about the integration, but it's a pretty straightforward sell compared to some of these really complex enterprise software solutions.
Yeah, absolutely makes sense. So we talk about data misalignments. Now I want to talk about misalignments when it comes to messaging. So we build this great messaging based on our company vision and company brand. And obviously, to your point, marketing people, they have a different nature. They're really data driven. They try to go back to the psychology of the buyer. Salespeople, on the other hand, just want to get the job done. Whatever works, whatever is simpler, and building that alignment between the two team, or not only sales, and even when it comes to customer success, even our support team, to have the same messaging, so it shows the brand identity. I want to hear some horror stories, like if you can actually share, of organizations that you consulted or worked with in the past that couldn't really figure this out, and how you helped them get back to this alignments.
Well, I think that almost every organization I've stepped into has been a horror story when it comes to messaging for a couple of different reasons. Yes, the messaging is siloed from marketing. Marketing thinks that they can make the messaging up. Sales thinks they can do it. Customer success has their own version of it. Um, the most the most important thing is to go back to the root, however, and understand who your ideal customer is and why they're buying. So I think we've talked about the three whys before. Why are they buying? Why are they buying now? And then why are they buying from your company? And if your messaging is not aligned to those three whys, there's no point in having it. And I find often cases, each of the silos will focus on one of the three, but not necessarily all three aligned together. It's got to be nuanced. So sales is going to have a version of that compared to marketing, compared to customer success. But that messaging always has to be continuously live and improved. The organizations that I've worked at, we review that every single quarter.
Wow.
I think the nature of and the pace of change in technology sales in particular, especially with the advent of AI, if you're not reviewing that on a continuous basis, at least every quarter, you're going to fall behind, and your messaging is going to get stale, and it's just not going to hit the target. But it's also has to have a constant feedback mechanism. So someone needs to own the messaging, and marketing is usually probably the best because they're the best wordsmiths. But there has to be constant feedback from sales and from customer success to continuously refine that messaging.
That's really interesting. So you guys had this like reviews on a quarterly basis, because to your point, market is changing rapidly, to make sure that everybody knows about the changes. And also, something even more interesting you said was you try to customize it based on your internal audience. So salespeople get a version of that messaging that maybe marketing own or built, and each organization might have something a little bit different, but aligned with the overall brand and overall strategy for the company.
Right. It's got to be aligned around the whys again. And if it's not aligned around the whys, you can change the language slightly, but at the end of the day, you have to have the context of that message in all three areas, and it's got to be the same. It makes sense to change the wording when you're in a sales situation versus when you're in a marketing situation versus when you're in a customer success. Underpinning all of that, you've got to have the core message from the company to be consistent.
Look, to your point, marketing typically owns, writing these messages, right?
Marketing is responsible for crafting the words, but crafting the message should happen with all three groups and the executive leadership as well. So it should be a team effort in creating that message. Marketing can pretty the words up, can pretty the images up, can create nice splashy videos. But that message needs to come from all of the groups combined, because they all have different perspectives on interactions with the client.
This is super cool. So I'll ask another question. So the executive team, when you talk about like having a say, is it just sharing the vision and the big picture, or to really get hands-on and work on messaging hand in hand with marketing and other teams? So it means, like, do you guys really actually sit down and work on messaging?
Absolutely. And if an executive team is not doing that, then there's something wrong. They own the success of the company at the end of the day. The buck stops with them. And if they're not involved in the process, they can certainly delegate some of the tasks down, some of the mechanical tasks associated with that. But if they're not in there as part of the process in developing that messaging, they should be somewhere else. They should be at a different company, because they need to, they at the end of the day, they own those results. The sales, the VP of sales owns the sales results. The VP of marketing owns those results, customer success, and ultimately the CEO. Typically, even in large organizations that I've been at, the CEO sits at the table while the discussion is happening.
This is interesting. It reminds me of my conversation with another guest about being a theoretical leader, actually be in the trenches with your reps. Not only, build the trust, someone needs to, build that foundation anyways. So by actually doing it, you not only, build that trust and send the message that we are involved, we care. This is all of us actually working on the same project. You learn what actually works best, for your organization based on the vision that you're transferring to other teams. So that's really cool. I wanted to talk about, John, AI. Again, buzzword, everybody's talking about it. We are in the space, but how do you keep your team's strategy fresh and reactive to market changes? How do you really make sure that your team is aligned with everything is happening?
So I encourage my team to experiment and embrace technology. Definitely put a box around some of that. That nothing is going to go public without some discussion.
Yep.
But I certainly encourage them to try ChatGPT or Microsoft Copilot or any of the other AI tools out there. Same thing with marketing. I think it's been a game changer, and this is why I talk about changing your strategy every quarter, or at least realigning it every quarter. The changes I've seen in the last 2 years from the activities that a salesperson does and the velocity that they can operate at with AI is incredible. And it just continuously gets better and better. Every new version of AI that's out there, it allows them to be more effective. It allows them to target clients better. The messaging comes out stronger. It allows them to focus more on the things that matter, the strategic activities, and let AI take care of the minutia.
Many executives, at least this is what I'm seeing so far, are gatekeeping access to some of these tools. Yes, there's data integrity problems. There, again, so many reasons as of why. I understand that, but you mentioned that you even ask your team, you tell your team, go and try things, because this is not even the future. This is now. You need to be aware and hands-on with some of these tools. How do you build a balance between having enough security and making sure that no data leakage is happening, while giving your team enough flexibility to freely really test these tools and be more familiar with what's happening?
Yeah, I believe in creating a playground for them, a box set of data that's not going into our internal systems, but
Hmm.
has the data that they need. Because you're right, there is security and data integrity to be concerned about. So you create those parameters around that, but let them go. Uh, I have a couple of key philosophies. One of them is, what if they're right? So I encourage all of them to try and experiment. There's no such thing as a bad idea. There's better ideas.
So when it comes to, again, testing some new tools, and this is a selfish question, for myself, because I'm learning from this conversation. So there are a lot of startups that started during the past couple of years, and now we see even more coming to the market with some really innovative solutions that can bring big change. But obviously, they don't have the brand or even capacity to make sure that everything is 100% aligned with, let's say, a senior executive leadership team that might think and compare with solutions like Microsoft or ChatGPT that you mentioned. What's your reaction if, let's say, one of your team members bring a new tool like ours? Said, John, I heard a lot about this, guys. I want to give it a shot. How would you go about that?
First of all, I would listen to them. Anytime one of my team brings a new technology in there, and I encourage them to do it, I encourage them to be out there and look. Um, we have a process that we go through where they need to basically present the value proposition. They need to sell me this pen, and they need to sell me that tool. And as long as it makes sense, let's get in there and let's evaluate it. And I have a matrix that I use for evaluating tools, and I have for probably the last 25 years. And you look at the cost, you look at the benefit, you look at the efficiency gained, What's it bringing to the team? And as long as I see value in there, let's take the next step and let's run a pilot. Let's try it out, and then we evaluate the pilot on an ongoing basis. And then at some point in time, we decide whether we're going to embrace it company wide or we're going to jettison the tool. The fine line is understanding how long do you run that pilot versus waiting too long and you've invested too much time in it. And it's a bit of a sliding scale depending on what that tool does and what potential value it can bring to the company. I think a lot of leaders wait too long to make that tough decision to say, nope, I'm not going to use this, or vice versa. They're too fast to embrace a tool that's bad for the organization.
All right. I wanted to ask my last question, Jon. From your perspective, which teams within the go-to-market structure tends to show the most and least resistance to aligning with, broader organizational goals?
Sales, again, I'm sorry, I think I've been at it for 40 years. It's why I hire salespeople. I want them to have that independent thinking. I want them to be out there being creative and being a bit of a maverick. Certainly, they need to work in teams. They need to be part of the process. But it's why I hire them because I want that independent thinking.
And which one of the teams are actually most open to these changes?
Customer success.
Mm-hmm.
They tend to be very process oriented, a lot more rigid. They work off a set of known data for a large portion of their job. They tend to adapt well.
Interesting. All right. Look, Jon, I appreciate you a lot. Thank you very much for taking time today again to share your insights with us. If someone wants to reach out to you, first and foremost, can they, and how?
Absolutely. You can drop my email into the post. And that's probably the best, or they can reach out to me on LinkedIn and connect with me on LinkedIn. I think that's how we first connected, 2.5 years ago.
That is true. All right. Look, I appreciate it, Jon. Thank you very much, guys. Hope you enjoyed this podcast, and I'll see you soon. Bye for now.